So our native oyster, which is known as the Olympia oyster, has almost been eliminated from our bays and estuaries due to overharvesting, loss of habitat, and pollution. And so we think it's important to bring back a native species itself for the importance of the species, but also because it provides habitat for fish and invertebrates, and it can provide shoreline protection for humans, and it can help filter the water.
So the oyster shell that we're using is clean Pacific oyster shell, so a different species that we actually got from an aqua farm. So it doesn't have any tissue on it, and you'll see it's very complex, so it's got a lot of nooks and crannies. And this Olympia oyster, even though it's a different species, it provides that good habitat for it to settle. And even though the oyster numbers of the native is really low, there's enough remnant populations around the bays and estuaries in the water that if we build the right habitat in the right place at the right tidal elevation, we can get the more native salmon coming back, which is the goal.
We use a lot of muscle power, so part of this project is totally fueled by volunteers. We think community-based restoration is really important because people get to see and understand the oyster. We also use all of that cleaned shell and we leave it in the sun for a year so we can be sure there's no parasites or other material on them. Then we use a series of crates and buckets to carry it across the mud flat. And then we just dump it on top of a coconut coir material. And that helps it keep its bed shape for a while and then eventually breaks down in the water. Then we just use some rakes and we put it at a certain height from the mud. And we tie it all shut so that we have these little oyster pillows all over the mud flat. There are young larval oysters in the water swimming around at certain times of the year, and what they're looking for is some sort of hard place to settle or to land. And they can settle on rocks and pier pilings, but for the most part that's not their preferred habitat. What they do is they look for a chemical signature of calcium carbonate, which is a shell. So if we put down shell, what we've done is give them a lot more potential habitat on which to settle, and eventually we get a lot of adults on that bed. In Alamitos Bay, where we are, we had seen no native oyster beds. We'd seen a couple adults and we'd seen larvae in the water column, but in 2012, when we first put in those shell, we were the first to really increase the oyster population. And so now it's still there and doing pretty well, has lots of native oysters on it. Today we put in about 4,000 pounds of oyster shell, and we think it'll be very successful. We did it ahead of the larval season and we're hoping for a good recruitment.